I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing Health and Human Services, Israel, the border, the deep fake, and Joe Biden's ability to communicate with the dead. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday. I almost said happy Joe Biden Thursday.
It is a Joe Biden Thursday. Every day's a Thursday. Thursday for you, Thursday for you. What's my name again? Who's the president of Mexico? So if you didn't hear in his speech that he gave as to what he's doing with the border, he referenced Egypt's president and not the president of Mexico. So that actually explains why our southern border is having problems. He talked to the wrong president.
Oh. What's the president of Egypt? Is it El-Sisi?
Mm-hmm. So he was talking to El-Sisi instead of the president from Mexico. So we have a border issue because he doesn't know who to talk to. And when he does know to talk to, apparently they're also dead. He talks to dead people. In just a 1 week span, he referenced having 2 conversations with 2 different people at 2 different points in time that would have meant that both of those individuals were dead, and he was communicating. I don't know if he uses a Ouija board.
He uses a Ouija board.
So, yes, our President Biden routinely and repeatedly has referenced talking to people who are no longer alive. Got to know what he's doing to get that done. Maybe he has that power.
Well, I'm sure he talks to a lot of people.
That are only in his
wife
head.
Needs to talk to him and tell him to get out of the race.
Yes, she does.
Give it up. Like I saw on the news the other day, as one person so eloquently said, it's elder abuse. And I think you and I said that many months ago. This is elder abuse.
It is. It is absolutely elder abuse. There is no reason that he shouldn't be off enjoying his retirement years. But I will say, if he was off and enjoying his retirement years, do you think he would have actually faced consequences for intentionally taking classified documents and intentionally disclosing the information in those documents?
No, because it's apparent as long as you have a D after your name and you're of power, which I still don't know how he's of power, the habitual liar from Delaware. They will never be held to account. Nor will that guy on your screen right there ever be held to account either. Is that McCabe?
That's McCabe. So yeah. I'm pulling up an article right now so I can give a good reference. And it's former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe argued Friday, so this is last Friday, that the special counsel's report on President Biden's retention of classified documents while vice president has nauseating similarities with findings from the agency's 2016 investigation into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's emails. And so Robert Hur, in his 388-page report, found that Biden willfully kept the documents after leaving the White House, but yet is recommending no charges. Part of that is executive privilege or presidential privilege, that they're not going to bring a case against a sitting president. But Biden was referred to as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory.
So a dithering old man that can, at the drop of a hat, annihilate an entire country or give weapons to a country so they can start annihilating another country, it's okay to not prosecute him, to not hold him to account. He broke the law, as I say all the time, and you do, whether it's Democrat or Republican. If they broke the law, prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Now, maybe you can't prosecute him right now because they're using the law to their advantage, which is you cannot indict a sitting president. But since they're trying to indict former President Trump on trumped-up charges, then yes, I guess you could prosecute him after he's out of office. But according to her, he's just a dithering old man that doesn't deserve to be prosecuted. So you, as a almost 40-year-old, when you become 60, 70, 80. If you ever get in trouble, just use that as your defense.
Use the Biden defense.
Yeah,
I'm just an old person.
Old person who has a kind heart, who meant well, but I broke the law.
Non-prosecution, yes. So we're seeing this repeated example. Now, McCabe was also defending Biden in this scenario because of the reports that came out. Basically, according to DOJ policy, if you're not going to prosecute somebody, you're not supposed to say anything bad about them. And so that's part of why he was coming out, because we said something, or the report said something bad about Clinton, that she willfully disregarded the law, essentially. I know they watered it down. And then for Biden, they just said, oh, he was a well-meaning old man who is sympathetic, etc. So you're not supposed to say anything bad if you're not prosecuting.
So here is two Democrats, a presidential candidate and a vice president, who both broke the law, who both are not going to be prosecuted. Yet you have a president who was one of the most successful in the history of the American country, who during the 2020 presidential election was getting feedback from all of his people around him, his inner circle. Hey, we might want to look at the voting here in Georgia. There's a lot of scuttlebutt that there's misgivings going on. We might need to look in this county. We might need to look over here, which is basically, if I'm to understand right, what he did. That does not mean that he told them to go out and break the law.
So to Trump's credit or discredit, whichever way you want to look at it, when he was making the call and he's like, find me those, whatever it was, 10,000, 12,000 votes. And this is after the election has happened. If you go to bed and you're ahead by thousands of votes, and then you wake up when they supposedly quit counting, although they were really still counting apparently in the middle of the night, and then there's a vote swing that statistically doesn't match the number of votes that should have been counted, aren't you going to call somebody out and say, hey, where did those 12,000 votes go?
Right.
And if they said, well, we had a stack from a 99% Democrat county that got uploaded, okay, that might help the swing. Are you wrong? Are you wrong for asking the question? Is that what you're saying? You can't call, I mean, you're the president. You're supposed to be able to essentially call anyone. You can't call and say, hey, what happened here?
Yet it's okay for Democratic senators and congressmen on the House and the Senate floor to demand that you stop the vote, that you don't certify. So here you go. Here's 2 more Ds or 3 more Ds. That it's okay for them to demand you stop the vote, for them to demand that the person with the R is not the duly elected president. You have somebody that ran against him that still says she won.
That somehow in 2016, we had corruption that led to Trump being elected. But in 2020, we had what they called the most secure election ever. Most secure election ever is what we are supposed to believe. And if you brought up any inconsistencies anywhere, you were slammed on social media, you were demonetized if you had monetization on YouTube and the like, you were deplatformed, people were banned, barred, everything in between, if you had the audacity to question 2020.
I'm not going to say that COVID was intentionally pushed on the American people during the election cycle, because I don't believe in conspiracies until they're proven to be true. However, it was convenient timing that states were able to send out all these absentee ballots.
When their laws don't even allow it. Sorry to interrupt.
That's
Continue.
okay. And they did this ballot harvesting, and we're just small fish here in the big pond, you and I. We have a lot of fun doing this podcast. We have some good listeners. But when you have heavy hitters like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, who has millions of followers, so he's not a nut. If he was a nut, True Social or the other social networks would have booted him off a long time ago.
Instagram, YouTube, everyone would be.
All of them. When they're in the know that there was some hanky-panky going on with this ballot harvesting, because they have friends in high places and they have friends in low places. and they were able to take a compass heading, so to speak, and triangulate onto the fact that what happened in 2020 was legitimate, but it was not legitimate. There was a lot of hanky-panky. Were the machines messed up? I don't know. But it's interesting that they have an expert on a major network check one machine and it malfunctions. It's interesting that you and I just happened to go to vote in two different polling places.
Yes, we were not in the same polling place.
And it wasn't because our physical machines at our location broke. They were tied into the downtown mainframe in Fresno County. And that machine or that computer went down 3 times in a 1 hour period. So I finally, after waiting in line for 2 hours in the rain and then deciding I want a paper ballot, I made them give me a paper ballot and I did my vote by paper. Did it count? Don't know. Not a clue.
And in your case, in my case, so just here locally, here in town, for you, it was waiting a couple hours. For me, it wasn't as long. The line was a little bit shorter for me. And at the time that I happened to go, I got, I would say, up there within maybe 10 minutes or so. And then once I got to the machine, as the person is attempting to program it for me to start, is when it goes down. And I ultimately ended up having to go on a different machine. And then what also happened in Phoenix, they had a bunch of major outages too. I don't know that we were all on the same system, but they had outages all day. So if your boss gave you a couple of hours to go stand in line, and they 3, 4, 5 hours later, are you going to still be standing in line? Did you make it to the line after work? If you tried to go before work, people were stopped from voting by the simple fact that the machines were down for hours. Not everybody had the luxury of waiting.
Right. And what I'm hearing a lot of from all different communities, all different ethnic groups, from the Hispanic community, the Black community, the Chinese community, and white, but other than white, because even though we're classified as white, there's a whole group out there, different groups, that they're dissatisfied with the direction this country has gone under Joe Biden. They don't like what the Democratic Party's doing. They're leaning back towards the R side or the candidate that's currently in the lead right now, 2024, a few months before the election. If they vote him into office again, or if he steps down and they take a fake person and vote them in, I'm going to be so disappointed in this country. I think I'm going to be just like the one lady from The View, because she made the statement last week that if Donald Trump wins, she's going to leave the country. If Biden wins again, I'm leaving the country. I'm leaving the country of California, and I'm moving to the country of Florida. I'm out.
Peace out.
Peace out.
You're done with it?
Just kidding. I would just be very disappointed because these people cannot continue to complain and complain and complain. And then when they have the ripe opportunity to change it, they don't. They just jump in line. The Democrats are good about that, especially in the Senate and the House. They will circle the wagons. They protect each other to the nines.
Oh, absolutely. They are the Republicans will cut each other's throats, especially when you have the more conservative side and your middle of the road. Not necessarily RINO, because you have your RINOs and then you have your middle of the road Republicans and then you have your ultra conservatives. And a lot of them have been splitting from one another. And that's actually how we ended up losing the Speaker of the House, was because of that faction split. But something that we are seeing within, it takes years for some of this to come through, but within the legal process of voting in Pennsylvania, they illegally pushed mail-out ballots or mail-in ballots. They illegally pushed them out to everybody, citing COVID. It was later determined that that was unlawful, but they said, too late. It's already happened and we're accepting it. Another political organizer and former president of City Council of Atlantic City has been charged with submitting fraudulent mail-in ballots. Now, these were for 2022. So we're talking the mid. So we have a person arrested for procuring casting, and tabulating fraudulent mail-in ballots. If we fixed our 2016 to 2020 problems, how are we back in a situation where in 2022 we have issues? They were fixed, were they not? But in Pennsylvania, they just said we'll stop mailing out ballots. Here in New Jersey, Atlantic City, it's just a onesie. It's a onesie-twosie.
Yeah, and then what did you look up a few months ago was the fact that one vote can make a difference in a local and a state election.
Yes.
So then a few thousand votes can make a difference in a presidential or a senatorial or a Congress election.
Right. So if we're doing it a little bit here and a little bit there, those little bits everywhere start adding up. We've seen it across the country. And then if you listen to the language change in 2020, it first started with the news media putting out that there was no fraud. And then they slowly changed their language to there was no widespread fraud. And then they never defined what it would take to meet widespread fraud. So they didn't have a definition that they had to meet. And so they can say whatever they want.
Right. So when there's so let me back up. So what you're saying is when there's billions of dollars in monies and power, fraud is inevitable.
Fraud is going to happen.
Yes.
And to say that we secured our election and that no fraud happened in 2020 is to repeat lies.
So then one of the ways to fix it is what?
In-person voting only, and you have to produce identification with your serially assigned ballot number.
And every 4 years, you should have to re-register. That way you clean the doles up. That way there is no hanky-panky
If
at
anyone
all.
moved, you're not going to get a mail-out ballot that goes to the wrong address. You're not going to get, just like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where we had elected officials, or at least one elected official in Washington, D.C., voting in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. And then she was just the highest elected official that got caught up in that scheme, but there were others who did it too, voting in D.C. and Maryland. Oh, I didn't know you couldn't do 2 votes. I live in 2 different jurisdictions. No, you only get residency in one. Pick your one. I know some people want to be in a state and they don't technically want to live in Washington, D.C. because they don't have full states' rights. I get that, but you made a choice. So go with your choice. If you have to live in the area you're elected to, that's a requirement for everyone then.
Right. And hasn't it always been one person, one vote?
Yes. And somehow, the person who's elected to an office didn't know. And so there you go with double voting there. I was sent 2 ballots technically they came out in February of 2020 for the March of 2020 election. I was sent 2. I'm only one person. My husband was sent 2. We both registered not to get our ballots mailed to us. We were having a problem with our mailbox and with our mail itself. And so we said, do not mail this to us because we were having such issues with USPS. And then what happened? Not only did they mail us each one, they mailed us each 2. I don't know why.
So you could have had your kids vote too, right?
Don't know why you would not notice that you doubled up. Anyway.
Well, so you've come up with 3 line items that'll help fix the problem. So let's add a 4th, term limits. Because term limits will help take the power out of the elections. Because these people know that if they have to bend the rules a little bit to win, maybe they're willing to do that, like voting in 2 counties. So let's look at that. Let's look at all the money that these people come and offer up to these folks in the form of lobbying.
Right, lobbying gone.
So let's do away with lobbying.
Get rid of it.
And I know it's kind of beating a dead horse. We've talked about this a couple, 3 times, but until you get the opportunity to stand on the highest mountain to where everybody will listen to you, we have to keep being a little redundant every month or 2 to remind everybody that put that in the back of your head that our election system is a little broken right now. We can fix it. However, it's going to take all of us to fix it.
Yes, we're all going to have to work together to say we do not accept what is going on, and we will not continue to accept what is going on. So something that would have to go with the term limits, I guess I'm just going to keep piggybacking. Something that would have to go with the term limits would be that the bills that have money attached, when they want to impact the future, sometimes they write the laws in certain ways to negatively impact specific people. So for instance, conspiracy theory time.
Do it.
The Ukraine funding bill. So we had the National Security and Border Act that failed at this point. But the Senate is pushing a Ukraine bill, and it has raised alarm bells. And this is why we should all care. So then it's a $95 billion Senate bill, $95 billion to fund Ukraine, and it contains what Senator J.D. Vance calls an impeachment time bomb. That's what he's saying this contains. And it's aimed at former President Donald Trump if he wins re-election in November. And he has called on his Republican colleagues to vote against it, but keep in mind right now the Senate is favored by Democrats. So buried in the bill's text is an impeachment time bomb. This is what J.D. Vance's language is. For the next Trump presidency if he tries to stop funding the war in Ukraine. So what had happened to him in 2019 is that he withheld funds for Ukraine because he said Ukraine was corrupt and they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and he withheld the funds. Congress came out and said, you can't do that. We appropriated it. It's signed into law. You have no choice. You have to give it to. So they moved to impeach him. So this bill has funding well into a next presidency, which ultimately could be Trump's next presidency. And if it does, if he does the same thing, which is attempt to withhold funds from Ukraine, he can be set up to be impeached again.
Well, that's why they do this stuff in 10-year clips. And you'll see that like with the cell phones that people are still getting for free. That was a 10-year thing, which was extended by Congress, I believe. And they always do them in 10 years. That way it can go to the next president and they can't stop the funding, which is wrong. And that is something that needs to be corrected, and it should be line item only. They should not be commingled with other stuff. And these lawyers, that's why I keep hearing, oh, you got to have lawyers as congressmen and senators. No, you don't.
You just have to have them on your staff.
That's how we got into this mess.
It is.
I'm not disrespecting lawyers because it's a very hard craft to go get your bachelor's and then go to law school and become a lawyer and understand hundreds of manuals and books on English law.
It's a whole nother language. Learning legalese is literally learning a whole nother language. So more power to them. But then what we do see, the original proposal for the National Security and Border Act. Oh, national security. So you think, oh, our national security and border. Oh, of course, that's our border.
No.
But it wasn't. So inside the National Security and Border Act was just starting off page 3. On page 3, Title 1, Department of Defense Military Personnel, Army. Okay, National Defense. This is starting out great. We're going for the Army. For an additional amount for military personnel Army, $207,158,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2024 to respond to the situation in Ukraine and for related expenses. Okay, next, military personnel, Marine Corps. And what do we have? $3,538,000 to remain available, same time frame for the situation in Ukraine. Oh, Air Force, $23 million plus, situation in Ukraine. Military Space Force, $4 million plus, situation in Ukraine. We start off the bill, our National Security and Border Defense Act with Ukraine, Army, Navy, all of it. Navy was going to listed here $1.6 billion to remain available for the same time period. Response to Ukraine. Operation Maintenance, Air Force. So then they break it down because it's personnel and then operation and maintenance. Again, Ukraine. And we go again, just breaking it down by defense area and whomever. Ukraine, billion here, billion there, 13 billion, 2 billion for the Army for missile procurement for Ukraine. Now I've gotten to page 10, and still it's about Ukraine. And we don't start seeing the border get in there until later. They even do research, development, test, and evaluation for the Army for research development, $18 million. But this one extends September 30th, 2025, and that was for Ukraine. Department of Energy even gets some. And this is for an additional amount for, and then it quotes, in quotes, science, $98 million to remain available until expended for acquisition, distribution, and equipment for development and production of medical, stable, and radioactive isotopes. And then provided that the Balanced Budget Act is met, atomic energy defense activities, National Nuclear Security Administration, $143 million plus for Ukraine. Additional federal expenses for Ukraine. And we have to keep going down and keep going down. Now I'm on page 26. Oh, we finally see the Department of Homeland Security. All of those billions of dollars that I was going through, that was all Ukraine. All of it. And in fact, Ukraine had more funding in this one single bill than the entire annual budget for the Marine Corps. In this one bill. And I understand the Marine Corps is smaller in comparison to, say, the Navy or the Army. But here we finally have Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, $20 million. And what are they going to do? Expenses related to the administration of nonprofit security grants. These nonprofit grants are some of the ones that you've been hearing about, where they've been giving hotel rooms and debit cards and cell phones and all of these nights. So that's our first border thing, is making sure that there's money to continue to fund the nonprofits. We, taxpayers, are funding people illegally crossing the border and whatever lifestyle they need after that.
And they should all be prosecuted. Any Republican or Democrat, House or Senate or president that would sign it, that votes for something like that, should be prosecuted for giving away the American citizens' money. Because this is just one entity. This has nothing to do with HUD, Housing and Urban Development. This has nothing to do with all the young kid, baby entities we have out there that try to take care of single moms and single dads. Yeah, we just don't have the money to continue to do these type of things. We are in debt up to our eyeballs. Okay, we can't just keep printing money. We can't pretend that this is going to go on indefinitely. You know, Ukraine and Russia had the opportunity 18 months ago to come to peace with each other. There was a proposal on the table, and the U.S. said absolutely not. So then obviously their gain is to just continue to allow Ukraine people and Russian people to kill each other.
Apparently.
They're in the hundreds of thousands.
And then what did the military industrial complex, what have we talked about? Who is winning in this? Because so far I've just gone on 2 pages for FEMA, and that is going to not U.S. citizens and not lawful permanent residents. And most of this money is going to Ukraine. Who is winning? The winners are the military industrial complex, and the winners here are these nonprofits, because as we've talked about before, no matter how much you love the nonprofit idea and that they're there to save people, they're not. They are money-making schemes. So for every $5,000 debit card that they're giving out to people, guaranteed they are pocketing way more than that.
Oh, 100%, probably 3-4-fold. But it ties back to what we just said 10 minutes ago, which is the people that vote these folks into office need to educate themselves and read this sort of thing and stop it. Help stop it as a group. If we, like I said, if we don't get together and stop this, this train will never stop. It's a train that's going to run into a brick wall. Eventually, they think it's not, but it's going to. We cannot continue to spin like this. One little case in point, even though it's at a local and state level, is our local Fresno State University.
Are you about to talk about Measure E?
I keep hearing ads for Measure E, which is a tax just like our Arts to Zoo tax was, which I didn't vote for, but I guess it's been pretty successful because the zoo looks fantastic. But a group actually took the money and put it where it was supposed to go. They didn't do a bait and switch and put it into an account and say, oh, we're going to have to move that over here and use it for other things. Fresno State, according to their management, is $500 million behind on infrastructure repairs that they've had to defer because the state keeps denying them money. Why would the state deny them money and allow people to flood in here because we are a kinder, gentler state, to put it nicely? That's one university out of how many in California, how many high schools, how many junior colleges, how many school districts are struggling to take care of their buildings, but our federal people can suck money out of us in the form of taxes and then send it to everybody around the world.
Good point. They are taking our money and then sending it to everybody around the world. We constantly get bamboozled. And to talk about Measure E just for another hot second, I was looking into it a little bit more because the idea behind it, just as with other things, sounds good. We're going to keep dollars local. This is what they're telling us. They're going to keep the dollars local, that they're not getting enough from the state of California, that Fresno gets shortchanged on how much money they get compared to the other CSUs. So they're going to use this money, keep it local, and make Fresno State beautiful again. This is the idea that they're selling us on. If you look at Measure Z, they had a 10-year tax request. It's a sales tax that was approved by the voters for a period of 10 years. So we could actually use those 10 years to see if they did what they said they were going to do, because it got approved. And they did. They did what they said they were going to do. You can go to the Fresno Chaffee Zoo and look at how they've expanded it, what they've done, how they're doing their programming. And it has really helped. So then they put it on the ballot again. Look at what we did with the funds in 10 years. Look at how well we spent it. Would you give us another 10 years? So that way we can continue doing the same great things that you love about the zoo. And I believe that was voted yes too, because people actually saw their dollars at work. Measure E, they want 25 years. They're not saying, hey, give us some money, we'll show you that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing with it, and then you can vote on it again. They want a whole generation of time. 25 years is essentially a generation, because at approximately 25 years old, you're having a kid, next generation comes. You are locking in an entire generation to a sales tax. 25 years. I don't agree with that.
No.
I might agree with it if you said, give us a short period of time and we will show you that we will be diligent with your dollars.
That's what I was going to say. Great point is, let's do it building by building. Okay, we're going to raise the funds. We're going to start and complete the first building. Once that building's done, then it triggers the next building. Once that building's done, it triggers the next. If they cannot complete one building in a timely manner and it appears that they're squandering the money, it automatically stops.
And this is a 25-year. If you vote yes, we're on the hook with the sales tax of all of Fresno County for 25 years, and they get to do whatever they want with the funds. And that's the part, as far as the tax is concerned, that I find troubling. And a few years back, when they violated Title IX and then blamed the women for complaining about having less sports than men and told the men, oh, we have to cancel your sports because the women complained, they actually lost me at that point. So I am not as inclined to vote yes on Measure E, even if they were doing a 10-year, but I would appreciate it more if they did a shorter period of time.
Yes. And if it's a sales tax on certain products and certain location within Fresno County, and I know which one it is, I will not patronize them.
Guess who's about to shop and buy sale? Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I'm just kidding.
I will do it because I'm such a headstrong, hard person that if it comes to something like that, I will 100% do that. I will drive to Bakersfield or up the other way to
find
Stockton
a better
or Sacramento.
Well, we only have to go as far as Madera.
Yes, to find a better
get
product
a county.
to get into a different county.
Yes. So that is something that we do have to continue to follow up on. They say it's only going to be, it's only a little bit, but they want 25 years of only a little bit. I don't really appreciate that. We went a little bit with Measure E. We talked a little bit local. I would like to walk it back for a second to the Ukraine and Israel bill and the border bill. So when the border bill, which wasn't really a border bill, but as they titled it, when the border bill failed, our border didn't get better. We still haven't addressed the border, but instead of bringing up a single funding border bill, they brought up a bill just for Ukraine and Israel. That's kind of weird. We're complaining about what's going on at our southern border. We're saying we're being overrun. We're seeing the videos. We're seeing all the locations that are popping up. We're seeing, in some cases, gymnasiums taken over to house people who are unlawfully present. We've seen Chicago, the airport, has a whole, one of those cloth walls, so all of the people that are being bussed in and bussing through, they can reside there until they get on to their next place. They're getting money. They're getting housing. Maine, what was it, a year, 2 years worth of housing that they were going to get on taxpayer dime? Why is it that the sticking point of this bill was the overfunding of Ukraine and Israel and not taking care of our home, and then the Senate just turns around and solely focuses on Ukraine?
Well, it's because most of those people do not care about their home. They don't care about America. If they did, they'd knock it off. One of the biggest proponents of all this all the time, who complains the most about things, but then he's the first one to vote with the Democrats, is Mitch McConnell.
Yes.
Oh, the border it's porous. I wish I could talk the way he talks because it drives me nuts, and I'd love to be able to mimic him. But, he complains about how porous the border is, that people are coming up illegally, and the Democrats are doing this and Democrats are doing that. And the second the Democratic Senate proposes a bill, he's all over the news. We got to support this bill because it's the right thing to do.
And do the Democrats turn around and say the very same thing when Mitch McConnell was the leader of the Senate? Oh, we got to support these Republicans because it's the right thing to do.
Not one time.
Never. There is hardly a moment in which we have such unity, but guaranteed the Democrats are going to rally around each other and the Republicans are going to sell out.
And you know full well that you would never roll over to the D side because they're too liberal. You're very dissatisfied with the R side and want to leave them sometimes, and most times as well. Yet if you do go independent or you try something else, you don't stand a chance in a two-party system. So you're basically wasting your vote unless you can get enough people to rise up, which originally is what Bernie Sanders, even though he's a socialist or communist or whatever, tried to do. But the Democratic Party slapped him back in line.
Yes, they slapped him back in line in 2016. They did it again in 2020 because he actually ran on the Democrat ticket because he realizes how the two-party system works. He would never be a popular independent outside of Vermont. So he registers as independent when he runs for the Senate, and he registers as Democrat when he runs as president. And so we saw it in 2016 and we saw it in 2020 where the Democrats decided he wasn't going to be the guy. And they rallied around their, in one case, their gal, and in one case, their guy, and they smacked him out of the way.
Gets very frustrating when you enjoy politics, you like local stuff, you like national stuff, and you watch the same people stick their fingers in your eye on a repetitive basis, and there's not a darn thing we can do about it without everybody sticking together.
And we do ultimately end up getting divided with this D and this R stuff because you're the neighbor or somebody across the aisle. You find that you have so much in common until the Democrat or the Republican. But yet a lot of what you do is to meet in the middle. And I know I talk about RINOs, Republican in name only, and I'll call the others DINOs, Democrat in name only.
That's a good one.
RINOs and DINOs. But the reality...
Patent that. You need to get a hold of the patent office and patent that phrase.
Get my registered trademark going.
Yep.
So with these rhinos and dinos, the majority of the time there are rhinos, but there's hardly ever a dino. Even if they disagree with something the Democrats are doing, they will still go lockstep.
I think they've read the book like I have by Sun Tzu.
The Art of War.
The Art of War. And they are very patient, tend to just wait and wait and wait. And they always get what they want, ultimately.
They certainly do. And you have individuals, so looking at AOC, looking at the socialist Democrats of America, I think that as much as you want to make that happen, the Democratic Socialists, there's not really Democratic Socialists, so just drop the name. It's not going to happen. But the reality is a lot of what they attempt to push has come around and actually happened. And we see it even with Joe Biden. They are still sticking with him and talking about how great he is. Now, there's little rumblings off in the corner, but for the most part, they are still rallying around Joe Biden. It doesn't matter that he only has 3 things listed on his schedule per day, or that he's hardly ever there, or that he's the vacationer in chief. Now, I've been called out before because of how many times Trump went golfing. But if you look at the number of days that Biden has been on vacation and not really working versus the number of days that Trump, yes, he went to his properties, yes, he went golfing, but he still worked. Even if you take the work out of it, the number of days on vacation, Biden is well over what Trump did. Biden is even over what Obama did for 8 years.
Well, sometimes you don't want them there. You don't want them to work because they muddy the waters anyway.
Yes.
But whoever is filling in for him behind the scenes needs to go on a vacation and stop doing what he or she is doing.
So the problem isn't necessarily that Biden's been elected and that they're still rallying around him. The problem is the real president, we don't know who he or she is because it is not Joe Biden. He is on vacation, and yet stuff is still getting done. So either that makes Biden irrelevant, or that means somebody behind him, behind the scenes, is the real president. And we also know it's not Madam Kamala Harris, who can't talk her way out of a paper bag.
No, this is Mr. Barack's 3rd term.
Well, okay, so this goes to something we've been talking about. If we term limit, look at how Barack made a 3rd term. So we would still have to drain the swamp.
Well, yes, and then the presidential term needs to be modified as well. It needs to be 1 6-year term or 1 5-year term. Don't give them 2 4s. They can do enough damage in a modified term than having to make it 2 terms. I don't like the 2 term, and I sure didn't like it. I wasn't around when it was 4 terms.
Oh, FDR.
Yes.
Wasn't he a Democrat?
Yes.
And they're always accusing Republicans of usurping power?
Yes.
But anyway, something that has been talked about, the rumblings of what happens if Biden does decide not to run. Not necessarily that he's going to step down from being president, but what happens if in, say, June or July, he decides, withdraw my name, I'm not running for a 2nd term.
When's the convention? When's the Democratic convention?
August.
Well, that's when he's going to bow out.
Because some are asking, is it too late for another Democratic candidate to get into the race? And so there are only a small handful of states that have held the Democratic presidential primary thus far, but there is still not enough time for a new candidate to enter the race and beat Biden outright. Filing deadlines for about 80% of the upcoming contests have already passed and cannot be easily changed since they are set by each state. So, and there are not enough delegates at stake in the remaining contests where the ballot access is still open to win a majority. They could choose to do a write-in. Even though not every state allows it, they could choose to do a write-in Democrat Party rules could be changed. The DNC and the RNC are technically private organizations, and they are actually given a wide berth over how they select their nominees. So if you didn't know, they are given a little bit of a wide berth on who they can select. So essentially, Biden essentially controls the national party, as is standard practice for whichever party controls the White House. But any changes to the party's nomination rules would go through the DNC's Rules and Bylaw Committee, which has Biden allies on it, and it would be rubber stamping anything that they wanted to do in the future.
Well, and if they do keep him on the ballot, things have progressed too far down the road. That's why they're doing their level best to destroy Trump, or at least have him limp in damaged to the election. We need a good number 2 behind him in the unlikely event that some of this stuff does stick, whether it's trumped up charges or not. I listened to the speech from January 6th. It was actually played by one of these folks that has millions of viewers. And he said nothing about going to the White House or to the Capitol and causing any damage. He said to protest peacefully, and the rest of you that don't go there, go home in peace.
There was a lot that has been scrubbed from what he said to what he supposedly said to what it really meant and who really meant what, when, why, and how. There was even one, I believe it was a gal who gave her testimony that she watched Trump wrestle Secret Service to try and steer the Secret Service limo into a different direction.
Not true.
Not true. Never happened. And that was someone who was technically he hired in his circle who said that. So people would be willing to say
with enough money and a book deal and a network job, you'll say just about anything.
Yeah, but just kind of jumping back, technically, if Biden doesn't win the majority of the delegates, or if he drops out, and they were initially pledged to Biden, the 4,000 pledged delegates to win the party's nomination, they could theoretically move on to somebody else, which I find to be a weird process.
So basically they can do anything they want, and the voting public has no say in the matter whatsoever.
It seems like it, and it seems like the Republicans could do the same thing, that Trump could win everybody's hearts and minds in the Republican land. Everybody who votes Republican votes for him. He could win 100% of the votes, which isn't going to happen, but he can win 100% of every Republican vote. And then the delegates could be like, we're not bound to you.
They may do that. It's going to be interesting to see how this progresses. I like listening to his closest opponent, Nikki Haley.
Yeah, so it would just be a special meeting of the DNC. There are 500 members, and then they would vote to pick a new presidential candidate.
I bet they have some very special meetings. Cheaters.
Right. So again, I understand that we have a process that technically we don't directly vote for president. It's the delegates who come in later, right? We have the electoral college.
Yes.
That doesn't. It's supposed to be everybody goes with their state, and then they decide how they're going to divvy it up. Some places do it majority wins all, and some states do it where they split them. But did you know your candidate might not even make it to November? Not through, death or whatever, I understand that. But your candidate might not make it, and they can go ahead and 500 people get to decide what's best for the nomination of the country.
That's what we say about Congress all the time. I ask you repeatedly, how many people are in the Senate and House? 535. 535 are dictating, 535 plus one, the president, are dictating to almost 400 million people.
And there's supposed to be a separation of powers there,
yes.
Yet there's not.
No, how to live their lives, what to do with your money, how to take care of your children, how to take care of your ranch or your little humble abode. We've been duped here, just so you know. We've been given a pie in the sky here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really sad to think about.
Well, even Chicago Democrats now have figured that out. Chicago Dems turn on the far left mayor as migrant crisis wakes up voters. And they are saying this is not the Texas Governor Abbott's fault.
Right. It's funny that Democrats will blame Republicans and Republicans will blame Democrats, but you're like, hey, let's work on our border. Oh, you just hate people from other countries. You're the problem. Okay, there's a bunch of people. That's your problem. It doesn't matter if a bunch of people are coming in. They tried to suggest that they wanted a law change that would force everyone to reside in Texas as they waited to determine if they were going to be allowed in, asylum, etc. Now, if there's not a problem with people crossing the border, why would you have to force them to remain in one specific state?
Correct. And I think we had a pretty secure border for 4 years prior to this current regime.
It was not perfect.
No, it never is going to be. There's just
but
too
it
much
was much
space
better,
and too
yes.
many people.
And when I was working under the Department of Homeland Security, Trump gets elected, we were just told to push off everybody's opinion. The law is the law. Enforce it. Because over time, people would say, oh, I don't think we should be prioritizing this, or I don't think we should be prioritizing that, or that law, oh, it's not kind. We shouldn't be enforcing it. As an example, when you come in lawfully, let's say you want to sponsor your parents to come in. They're retired and they want to take care of the grandkids for you. You're young, you're working, they're retired, they're going to come in. Okay, so you actually have to sign a document that you'll be financially responsible for them for the next 10 years. Now, in some cases, maybe they're 55.
See, there's that 10-year thing. I told you.
10 years. Maybe they're 55. Maybe they're a doctor in their home country and they want to come over here and maybe work a little, so they go through the process. Potentially they do that. Great for them. Or maybe they're just done, they're retired, they're coming in, they want no other ties to their home country, they want to live with you. It's to make sure that people don't come to the United States and immediately end up on public benefits. Because then they're what's called a public charge, that they have no means of financially supporting themselves. So technically, every sponsor, you have a sponsor, they're signed up for the next 10 years. Well, for many years, they decided that that wasn't very nice, so they weren't going to enforce it. They weren't going to look at if you had enough money. If you had a household of 10 and you said, yeah, sure, I'll sponsor that person, but your annual salary was $35,000 a year, do you think you're really going to be able to take on number 11?
Nope.
So, under Trump, that document became enforceable. And people have been asking for many years, why do we even have this document if we don't enforce it? Trump enforced it, so people actually got denied because it was thought that they could be a public charge. If we don't like the law, who's responsible for changing it? Yes. So we just decided not to enforce certain laws. We didn't change the laws. So it just amazes me that that's what's happening with Biden and the border. And we're not going to enforce the law. We have the law. We have the law on our side. It's illegal. They are not really seeking asylum. And then the ones that are coming in and committing crimes, the sanctuary cities that they're committing their crimes in, no money bail, being right out released, going and getting their $5,000 and taking off to another state.
I think the if you don't have any money, you need to go home policy has been around since your great-grandparents. I believe that's the way it was when the Germans and Italians and Polish and English were coming through Ellis Island, that if you couldn't show that you could support yourself or your person that was going to take care of you had money, you had to go home.
Yes, or you would get stopped. You would be given the opportunity to prove that you wouldn't become a public charge, and this could be by whoever you're going to live with saying, oh, I have enough funds, I have a big enough living area, they're going to live with me, I have a farm, they're going to work the farm, we're all going to be taken care of. Because that's what happened to my grandma's, so great-grandma's side of the family. They actually got stopped at Ellis Island for being public charges, and then they had to overcome that. They were held, legally responsible on the public charge. They showed their proof of responsibility, and then they were allowed in.
Was that the 1920s?
Yes. It was over 100 years ago.
Interesting that law's been on the books since the 1920s. We've had how many Congresses since then?
Well, one session of Congress, I believe, goes for 2 years. It's been 100 years, so 50 sessions of Congress.
50 sessions of Congress. And they could not see it in their minds or hearts to change that law. So we just raise our right hand when we swear under oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. But they only do it when it suits or benefits them. Huh.
Weird. So let's talk about suiting or benefiting someone. So Assistant Secretary Rachel Levine, who works for the Department of Health and Human Services, was asked under Freedom of Information for records of scientific evidence, studies, and or data to support the Assistant Secretary's claim that gender-affirming care is medically necessary, safe, and effective for trans and non-binary youth. Because this is what the Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary has repeatedly said while public-facing. And so Protect the Public's Interest, PPT, a nonprofit watchdog, filed the FOIA for these documents, as well as for records of surveys of medical professionals regarding the value and importance of gender-affirming care for minor children. The response from HHS produced only one single document, which was 2 pages, a PDF called Gender-Affirming Care in Young People. And the document is on the HHS website and is not a scientific study, but rather a brochure that declares that research demonstrates that gender-affirming care improves the mental health and overall well-being of gender-diverse children. There is no science behind the science. They say science shows, but they could not, with scientific studies and evidence, point to where the science shows it.
Interesting how they work, isn't it? Like the science with COVID, like the science with solar and wind, there is no science.
There is no science.
How many times have we talked about, let's go to solar for a minute till we move on to the next topic. Let's make this a little mini topic. Since I listened to a quick interview, I didn't watch the whole thing with Tucker Carlson interviewing somebody from Canada. And I don't know if she's a prime minister, what she runs one part of Canada that doesn't agree with Trudeau, and they have, I think, some type of sovereignty that she doesn't want him dictating to their part of the country when they should drill, where they should drill, when they should put up wind, when they should do solar. That's for their citizens and their leadership to make those decisions. And basically she went bullet point by bullet point talking about the fraud of solar and how you cannot do solar, you cannot do wind without fuel. The carbon footprint on building solar is immense because you have the fiberglass, you have the composite, you have the steel, you have the solar panels, you have the cells, you have the trucks that deliver the stuff and go back and forth, that it's impossible to be carbon neutral, net neutral, zero emissions, zero carbon footprint, any of that with solar and wind.
It's all fake language. I mean, yes. It's made up.
It's made up. Attorney lingo. Because they write the brochures and they create the laws, and it's not accurate. And that goes back to what you and I always talk about. You need to do a hybrid thought process to where you're using solar, you're using wind, you're using fossil fuel, you're using nuclear, and you're using hydro. And yes, you can tweak the percentages in certain locations. You can't go solar 100%. Where?
Anywhere that the sun don't shine.
Yes, eastern states where it's cold and where it isn't sunny year round.
And you run into problems in certain states where they have hail that destroys rooftops, destroys cars, destroys anything in its path. And then the solar that we have here would just be completely destroyed.
Yes. And I've actually looked at a couple of articles and read them that some insurance companies in certain states will not insure you if your charging station is in your garage.
Yes, I've heard that too.
It has to be out in the driveway because unfortunately we still have the issue with thermal runaway to where the batteries are catching on fire and it takes specific type of firefighting equipment and firefighters to extinguish
to knock
them.
It down.
And once they get going and they start burning your house, it's not going to stop. So you want to go solar, go solar. You want to go wind, go wind. Just be mindful that there is no such thing as zero emissions or carbon neutral or any of that hooey or buying carbon credits. It's all fake.
100%. 100% of the time. And it's really interesting that they will still, AOC will celebrate the Green New Deal turning, 4, 5, 6 years old, whatever it is. And we're celebrating something that really doesn't exist. We can't be neutral if we had to use heavy machinery and equipment and all of this to get you that green energy product. And then we still have the lines that it goes in, not green, not carbon neutral. We still have the product that made it. And on down the line, as you said, the blades for the wind turbines, as we talked about, the timing out of them. And then there's a company that's attempting to repurpose them, but still very early on.
Well, in order to do all the things they want you to do, which is eat acorns and dirt.
And bugs, don't forget the bugs.
You would have to go back over 200 years. You'd have to go back to oil lamps, no fossil fuel.
Oh, are we going to go back to whale blubber? Remember when that was a thing?
And then that's a whole separate set of issues.
I don't think there's enough whale to go back 200 years.
No, there is not.
I'm not advocating for whaling.
No. So did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did watch the Super Bowl.
Thought it was a very interesting game. It was very close.
Yes, it was.
I didn't see a lot of cheating by the refs.
Well, okay, so I won't necessarily call it cheating, but some of the calls that they started calling were against the Niners first, when the Chiefs did the same thing. So it was one of those things like you need to call both or you need to call nothing.
Right.
And so, especially at the beginning, they weren't extraordinarily even with their calling of penalties.
Well, here's the thing. I can only talk about one quarter because I didn't watch the first, second, or third because
no worries.
I had yard and housework to do like a good husband, even though I was out working on a boat motor in the garage. Here's one thing that bothered me, and that's why I didn't watch the game, because leading up to the game the weeks prior, I got tired of hearing about Taylor Swift
and Kelsey.
It's irrelevant to me what their relationship is, what their love life is. I could care less. It's a multi-billion-dollar organization that puts on sports games weekly, multiple games. And that's what we're there to watch, is sports. And I knew that the cameras, because she's so popular, were going to pan to her a million times during the game. And I think just during the fourth quarter, I think I counted like 13 times, 12 or 13 times that they panned to her for her reaction to a specific play or something. And she probably knows zero about football or any sports, to be exact. However, that stadium holds, I think, 65 or 67,000 people. There was a lot of other people. How about the kids that were underprivileged youth that may have been fortunate enough to get a ticket? What is his or her response to what's happening?
Why not the people that paid $18,000 or $6,000 or just regular schmoes who managed to make it?
100%. What about the parents, the other parents of the other players, and the brothers and the cousins and the sisters and the wives and the kids? It's ridiculous. I don't know her. I don't care about her. I don't care if she's a gazillionaire. And I can promise you, because I trend and watch people in Hollywood settings and sports, once he's done with football and his physical makeup changes, like 100% of these athletes do, because they've worked so hard to get where they're at. And then they start not working out. They start getting a little pudgy. Their joints start quitting. Atrophy starts to set in. She will drop him in a hot second. And all this stuff will be moot. We'll move on to the next. Oh, now it's,
this player and
yes.
that girlfriend or
yes.
etc.
And we put too much emphasis on people like that. It's ridiculous.
So I want to bring up a couple things about Taylor Swift and all of this happening. So there have been conspiracy theorists who are claiming that this whole Taylor Swift Kelsey thing is a Pentagon psyop. Why? It's just out there. Some are saying that as soon as they're connected together, all of a sudden Kelsey's doing the Pfizer jab commercials and all of this other stuff. Anyway, so Pentagon denies Taylor Swift is a secret psyop used to sway public opinion. And so, just kind of putting it out there. Isn't that an odd thing for them to say?
It's a very odd thing. It's weird how these conspiracy theories come from all different angles. I'll tell you what I was disappointed at during the game, though, and I'm sure he was upset because maybe he wasn't getting enough plays or he wasn't getting the ball thrown to him. What he did to his coach was 100% disrespectful. He could have knocked the man down, which I thought he was going to do. He almost did.
He tripped.
And
him.
Andy Reid knew his value because he knew they couldn't win without him. Starting next season,
he should have been canned, benched,
gone. He will be, if it was me as a coach, he will be benched or would be benched for probably the first 4 games of the year.
Right, because if your 4th stringer did that, are you going to be like, oh, he didn't mean it?
No, it was...
And you should not be able to get away... The only thing you should be able to get away with is what everybody can get away with.
Yes, and here's the thing, is there's probably 1 billion people watching that game. How many young kids that play youth football, youth basketball, youth baseball were watching that thinking, it's okay if I get PO'd and my coach to go up and bump him, to push him, to curse at him.
Yell in his face.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
It was completely unacceptable. And yeah. It's unacceptable that should have happened, and he should definitely be benched.
And maybe he apologized after the game, which I'm sure he did, and they'll use that excuse, which I've had guys at my work want to get toe-to-toe and chest-to-chest with me, and then, oh, it's all in the name of work. It's all in the name of a heated moment. I apologize. It's inexcusable.
So the other thing that I will say with Taylor Swift, she came out in support of Biden in 2020, so there's questions as to whether or not she would come out and support him again. I don't know if she has elevated a position, but she elevated the Democrat Party belief and value system, if you will, which is green, being green. You need to eat bugs. You need to cut down on your meat. You need to offset with carbon credits. Well, she's doing the rich thing, which is offsetting with carbon credits while flying around on her private jet. And in fact, she has more than one private jet.
She's selling one, and I don't know if you know this, because some young kid was tracking her on flight tracking software and putting her emissions output all over the internet. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off, but she displaced other airplanes at the airport. I don't know if it was McCarran or another local airport in Vegas for the Super Bowl, so she could park her jet. So she needs to take her carbon credits and her green machine
and stuff it.
Yes. And put it where her lousy music doesn't shine.
She does what Bill Gates says. Oh, well, I buy carbon credits and I do so much more for the environment that it's okay that I do these things. And you know what? If you don't walk the walk, get out of here with talking the talk. I don't care about your talk. I don't care. You can scream at me until you're blue in the face about how we all need to jump on the Green New Deal. If you're buying carbon credits, you have no place in this discussion.
Yes, and like we say all the time, they're fake. They are so fake.
Yes. They are carbon credits are not real. And in fact,
go buy a cave and live in a cave.
Even the companies, these nonprofits, these companies that set up shop to go plant your tree, they're taking your money. They are taking your money because, sorry to say it, you are that dumb. If you believe that Joe Schmo in the middle of insert state here really care is that you're offsetting with carbon credits. They don't care. They are taking your money. And now I think I know what business I'm going to set up, the carbon credit business. Because that's the way to go. If rich people want to burn their money like that just so they can claim to be green.
Well, I think it was eBay or one of those internet sites when it first started. Somebody was on there selling trees, I believe. You buy a tree, I'll go plant it for you.
Yes.
And it was a $5 tree, and they were asking for a $20 donation or something like that. So somebody was pocketing a lot of money for a while.
Oh, wait. They were probably taking a picture of the exact same tree and sending it to everyone. Look, it's planted now.
Well, they didn't say they weren't going to pull it up and resell it and replant it. They just said they would plant a tree for a donation.
Move it over an inch, plant it again. I'm not sure if you heard there was a shooting at a church over the weekend.
Joel Osteen's
on
church.
Super Bowl Sunday, yes. So it was at Joel Osteen's church. I was shocked that it didn't make the news as big and as much as I thought it would make the news. There was, little mentions here and there, and then there was one that was focusing solely on Joel Osteen instead of focusing on the shooter. So early reports are saying that this individual was transgender. They had a history of mental illness, and they also had a criminal rap sheet behind them. But somehow they went and legally purchased an AR-15. And so I thought that alone, like the fact that it was an AR-15 would make the news and make it to where nobody was talking about anything else. Instead, we saw Taylor Swift mentioned more times than this person who bought the AR-15. Well, because they're transgender, because they would be in a position to be unusual. Female shooters are more unusual. Now, obviously, they do happen. What happened at the Christian school? It was a female, I believe she was trans or non-binary, also shooting with a long gun. So why is it that if it's a transgender woman inside of a church or Christian facility, we're not going to talk about it in the news?
Well, I think that falls along the lines of what we talk about with Israel. Why do so many people hate the Jews? If people don't read the Bible, or they don't understand it, or they don't know the history, then they should not hate another race, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it's because they have a lot of issues with Christians for some reason. They don't like the way Christians think. They don't like the way Christians have values, how they live. Is it a bad thing to go to church 1 or 2 days a week and believe in a book that documented history shows is actually real, and it's 3,000 or 4,000 years old, 103 to 105 generations old? Yet you can watch somebody like Taylor Swift, I'll just use her as an example, and these kids probably idolize her like she's something from another world.
So they do tend to idolize her and her Swifties, as they are called, as soon as they...
See, I didn't even know that.
Yes, they are Swifties. And when she endorsed Joe Biden, people who had no idea about politics, who Joe Biden was, who Trump was, whatever, she endorsed, done. That's who they're voting for. But you brought up Israel. And so I wanted to talk about something we brought up a few weeks ago. The UNRWA, UNRWA? How would you? UNRWA, out of the UN. So when we talked a few weeks back, Israel had found that 12 members of this group, 12 members of the staff, took part in October 7th. And they presented that information to the UN, and the UN fired or looked into those 12 people, and then came out and said, please continue funding, because U.S. decided to cut off funds and other countries decided to cut off funds. Please continue funding. Don't let these 12 people who may have done bad things represent the tens of thousands of people who work for the UN, etc. So now Israeli Minister of Defense has come out and said Israel has new evidence that it wasn't just a dozen, but dozens, plural, of individuals employed by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency participated in October 7th. Active participants. It's far greater than the 12 that they've already acknowledged and dismissed as of last month.
Yeah, it's hundreds.
Yes, so they're calling it Hamas with a facelift.
And if you look at the way the United Nations always belittles and badmouths Israel and always blames them and never the Palestinian Hamas people for their war crimes, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not in the thousands.
Half the populace of the...
Yeah, now...
Well, they've okayed it too. They have okayed the hate on Israel. They have put their stamp of approval.
And now Israel has decided that another community in the south, they found a lot of tunnels and a lot of Hamas fighters left there. So they're going to attack this other community. And now a lot of country leaders are up in arms because they don't want them attacking that specific spot, because those country leaders probably know there's a major infrastructure there. And if they wipe that out, that may force Hamas to either flee or surrender, or they're just going to wipe out a bunch of bad people.
And let's not forget their top level people are not in the area. They are not fighting from within.
No, they're in a hotel room, 5-star hotel room.
And they got the money.
Yes.
They have all the money. Speaking, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, and that's the thing. This thing could be stopped in a second. All these leaders from all these countries in the United Nations, which I haven't heard them say, all they have to do is look at the camera, stick their face up to a microphone like I have mine right now and say, Hamas, surrender. Put down your arms, put your hands up. We've been given assurances by the Israeli people that you will be treated with kindness and respect, even though you did what you did in October.
You'll respectfully go to prison?
Yes. I'm not saying they're not going to go to prison.
Yeah, yeah. We won't commit the same war crimes that you committed against
same atrocities, yes. Right.
So speaking of money, the money portion of things, rich people. So a Hong Kong-based finance worker of a multinational firm wired out $25 million after attending a video call where all employees were deep-faked, including the CFO. Apparently, these scammers staged an authentic-looking video call with multiple members of the company's leadership team. And so the worker thought he was talking to these high-level officials of the company and then was scammed into sending out $25 million. And that's the level that these deep fakes are going now. You think you're talking to the legitimate person. Visually now, it's not just on the phone. They're doing it via voice too. First it started out text, and then when that didn't work, some texts work, then it's voice, and now it's voice and video that they're able to fake.
So they're obviously using AI to help them out.
Yes, they are. And so something that was brought to my attention, not just with this particular one, but also for us regular folks. A lot of companies have gone to 2-factor authentication. So you'll see it likely on your banking and other things where they'll say, type in your username. Sometimes they ask for a passcode, or sometimes they say you can text to your phone, get that code, input that code, and then it will log you in. Apparently what some people have been able to do, and this is getting wider, so I want to let y'all know about it, where people are going to phone companies saying, I lost my whole cell phone. I need to port in my number. I need to buy a new cell phone and port it in. So they get the new cell phone, they get the new SIM card, and in some cases, they're able to authenticate that they are the real person. And in other cases, it's uncertain how they got all the way through to porting the phone number in. So they port in the number. They can get on your bank. It shuts your phone off. Now, fake person has your phone live. Get on the bank. If they have your username, put it in. Signed you in, says send you a text. The text comes through to that new phone that you just hooked up with that old number. So if you have two-factor authentication, there is a way to put a PIN code for a SIM card. So somebody can't just port in on a new SIM card with your phone company. Check it out. Because scammers are draining bank accounts with this.
It's amazing how far this goes back with cell phones. So back in the day, when I used to do road trips or travel down to Southern California, there was people so corrupt with cell phones and devices that they would stand on overpasses with this machine that captured signals, and they would point it at the freeway. So if you were on your analog cell phone, they could capture your code, and then they could clone your phone and do basically the same thing.
And then the charges would go to your phone bill.
Yep. So they would utilize that phone, and you would get multiple thousands in phone charges when, hey, I wasn't in Tahiti last week. That's not me. Amazing how that works. It's amazing the criminal element, if they would just take that energy and put it towards good, how far they could go.
How far we can get in society instead of trying.
But are they wrong or are we wrong? So let's analyze this. Is it because they see what kind of taxes the federal government's going to take from them, the state, locals, the Measure E's, the Measure A to Z's? You get a president in office that can't walk and chew gum at the same time, so your gas prices go up 50%, your food prices go up 40%, this goes up 10%. Why should they legitimize themselves and not work the system basically like the federal governments are working the system?
Okay, I could respect it more if they were taking, technically it's still our tax dollars, but taking from the feds or taking from local or state, but they're taking from the other people who are also getting screwed over. And most of the time, most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. It's over 60% of the U.S. population is living paycheck to paycheck.
So with my tongue in cheek, they are not the Robin Hoods of 2024.
They're robbing the hood.
They are not the hood, correct.
They're local hood. They're not robbing the government to give back to the people. That would be a little bit different. I'm not sure that I'd still accept it. We need to take down our government through financial means. Like, no, we're not going to keep giving you the money. You don't deserve the money. Our money doesn't go across the world. Thank you. Ukraine can fight the good fight against Russia. We don't have to endlessly fund wars. We don't have to fund the very country that was going to investigate Biden's son. Oh, magic. I know that's just a...
Yes, it's a conspiracy theory. That's why I've said multiple times, I believe that the very first building that was hit in Ukraine was hit by us, and it housed all the information on little Hunter.
So something we hear a lot in society, especially from our leftist friends, is that white people are horrible. We've done terrible, horrible, awful things. And in some cases, we need to either shut up or we need to both shut up and talk at the same time, because silence is violence, but talking when you're not supposed to be talking is also wrong. So there was a University of San Francisco, UCSF, had a guest speaker that claimed laws were set up to be against African Americans. And the laws that they ultimately ended up citing that said you could harm African American women, this person cited, Dante King cited, which rulings from the courts allowed this to happen, but the notes that were cited by laws in 1802 and 1858 specifically protected Caucasian women. And so it wasn't saying that it's okay to commit acts against people of color. Mr. Dante King came up with some claims that essentially said white people can run amok and there is no end to the atrocities that they can commit because the law allows it. So that was essentially Dante King's position. And to further that, he claimed that all whites are psychopaths. So the definition of psychopath is a person affected by chronic mental disorder with abnormal or violent social behavior. So according to Mr. Dante King, all whites are psychopaths. So if that is the position and that is true, should we just do away with whites in society?
Well, absolutely. But like you and I talk about going back in history and taking the sum total of the parts and putting it all together. So when the Romans were out destroying people, were they destroying people of color? Were they destroying whites? Were they white? Were they black? Were they brown? So when Egypt was doing their thing back in history, now a lot of people claim that Egyptians are closest thing to black, right? You hear a lot of people say that a lot of different races are not white, even though they look white. They appear to be white. So I don't know how to discern or break down who's the psychopath, who's the narcissist, because I think somebody that would write an article like that is one of two things. He or she is either ignorant to history and the world, or they are a narcissist or a sociopath. What's your background? What's your history? We don't know, but it would sure be nice to dive into it, because I personally, it's a good thing you brought this up, because I heard similar things on television probably a week ago, that whites need to go away. Well, I'm sorry. We're here for life. All the blacks that enslaved blacks in Africa, they're here for life. All of the Muslims around the world that enslave people still to this day, that treat their women as second-class citizens in most cases, they're here to stay. So I think you need to do a little introspect, if that's the proper term, and you need to look at yourself, my friend, because you have some issues. You have some real mental issues. Okay. Here's one white guy, middle class, simpleton, cares about everybody, doesn't have much use for people like you, but don't worry, my friend. You'll be judged in your own time, and your day will come.
Well, to me, we run into this thing. If we work to continue to perpetuate somebody as our bad guy, we have to stay hateful. We need somebody to hate, so that way we can get people emotional and then continue with the perpetual hate. We're never going to better our society.
No, and that's what happens in the Middle East, because they tribalize. They become little tribes, and then they war and they fight with each other. And I was going to go 1 inch further, which was, I don't watch The View, but I've seen articles about them. And I think there's one person there, Sunny.
Yes, Sunny Hostin?
Hostin.
Yeah.
Yes. And she found out recently that her family, back in history, no telling how far back, were slave owners. Yet she is still a proponent that she wants reparations.
And to find out that her parents, or through her parentage, were likely slave owners. So on the episode, it's funny that you bring that up. So on the episode of Finding Your Roots, it was revealed that Sunny, is only 7% indigenous Puerto Rican. She has held herself out to be Puerto Rican to the roots, but she's only 7%. And the researchers discovered that her third great-grandfather was the son of a merchant who was likely involved in the slave trade himself. And the third great-grandfather owned a human being by this. So moving back on that, they found that that she actually has heritage for Spain, which is considered white. So her 7% ancestry, she claimed whole ownership of being Puerto Rican, but she actually has deeper ancestral roots to Spain's colonial past. But yes, she wants reparations.
Well, and here's the thing for her and all these other folks and this professor, whatever he is. Slavery goes back thousands of years. Slaves have been owned by all different ethnic groups and races, not just whites, not just blacks. There has been abuse of men, women, and children from this day right here, this Thursday, back to the dawn of time. So these people need to get off their high horses, stay in their own lane, and knock this kind of stuff off. This is a type of divisive stuff that gets people worked up, gets them jacked up, And then they go out and do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. Hence, let's bounce to January 6th. Was not an insurrection, people. For anybody that's listening to me that knows me, we know what an insurrection is. That was not an insurrection, okay? That was a bunch of people that were led by our own FBI, our own Secret Service, and others. They got them jacked up on juice, and by that I mean they got their blood flowing, they got their adrenaline up, and a handful of them went out and did things that they would not ordinarily do. And you cannot have an insurrection that is unarmed unless you're going after people so weak that you can thump them with your middle finger and they fall over. This is supposedly the most well-protected, most powerful house in the entire world. And we let a bunch of people into it that probably can't even break into their neighbor's house when they're at home. I want to add something into this that I want to talk about next week, since I'm getting close to retiring. And I have not a retirement pension, but a 401k that I've paid into for many, many years. And then I'm on the cusp of Social Security. Going to seminars and listening to people talk about how Social Security works and how if you do Plan A, you get X. If you do Plan B, you get Y. If you wait until you're almost dead, you get the whole enchilada. And it doesn't make sense. Plan A, Plan B, the whole enchilada. Point is, how come we pay into Social Security, workers that pay Social Security for 35 years, in my case, almost 50, okay? The government can't just say, okay, you paid in X, here's your check monthly. No, they have to come up just like taxes, progressive taxes, a creative little formula that if you don't fall within the guidelines, you're going to be penalized for this, you're going to be taxed for that.
They make the rules so difficult that even they don't know how to follow them.
Why don't they just let older people that have worked their entire lives and been honest and true and paid their fair share, as some people say, just go off into their golden years in style instead of the person having to be stressed even when they're no longer working? Stuff.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.